Turn off your lights. Make sure your doors and windows are locked. Things are about to get spooky. I'll be late because they had to remove an old man who was behaving inappropriate with one of the air hostesses. I typed in my messenger app as we flew over the ocean. I can't believe that asshole bit her. I typed right before I heard some kind of commotion in the back of the plane. I found a time capsule with a letter inside that predicts my death by Page Turner 627. The past few years have been an absolute whirlwind for me. For years, I was a struggling writer, dreaming of becoming the next great American author. But I simply couldn't break into the literary industry. I survived for a time on freelance jobs ranging from article writing and blogging to copywriting and editing. They say every dog has his day. Mine arrived nearly 2 years ago when my debut horror novel, Fragments of Fear, exceeded my wildest expectations and became an unexpected hit. It landed on the New York Times bestseller list with reviews describing it as an atmospheric and chilling journey into the depths of human darkness. I hadn't reached Stephen King levels of name recognition, but copies of my book were front and center in bookstores. I even got to go on a 10-city book signing tour and participate in a few talk show interviews. My brush with fame made me wary of the limelight. So, with the earnings of my book sales, I purchased a 2-story house in the suburbs. The house wasn't extravagant, but it was far removed from the bustling city and the demanding publishing industry. It became my sanctuary, a place to find solace, recharge my creative energy, and explore my imagination without distractions. It was an older house and required some work, but I was excited at the prospect of making it my own. At the top of my to-do list was refurbishing the large backyard. I had always envisioned starting a family and imagined barbecues and children playing in the yard. Unfortunately, years of neglect had turned the backyard into a dense jungle of weeds and poison oak. I spent the better part of an afternoon meticulously mowing the lawn and pulling weeds. Afterward, I began to plant a new garden. While digging a hole in the soil for some potted flowers next to the old oak tree, my spade hit something solid. The metallic clang reverberated through the air. Fearing that I had struck a water or gas pipe, I put my spade down and carefully brushed away the loose soil with my gloved hands. What I uncovered was a small, weathered metal box buried just below the surface. The box was light, but sturdy. A blend of excitement and curiosity took over as I gently pried the box open with the head of my spear. Inside was a collection of old black and white family photographs of a couple and their young daughter. There were also trinkets slightly sentimental value to the box owner. A tarnished silver locket with a picture of a Labrador retriever, a small vial of sand, and a porcelain figure of a ballerina. Based on the content, I surmised it was some sort of time capsule. But what made my blood run cold was a sealed envelope bearing my full name and the current date written in cursive. This was impossible. Judging by the photographs, the box must have been buried sometime in the 1920s. I dropped everything I was doing and brought the box inside. Opening the envelope, I found a letter that read, "Dear Mr. Travis, if you're reading this, just know that in 5 days your life will end. We know this because we are the ones who brought about your demise. We apologize for the harsh reality, but implore you to understand the desperation that compels us. We seek to bring back our daughter, Lily, from the clutches of death, and your sacrifice is the price demanded. We deeply regret the burden we have placed upon you, extending across time. Please know our intentions are not cruel, but driven by unconditional love. We understand the enormity of this request. May you find some solace in knowing that your sacrifice holds the promise of restoring Lily's future. With heartfelt gratitude, Evelyn and William Hastings. P.S. As a small consolation, we have provided you with a glimpse into the upcoming week. A separate sheet listed the date for the next 5 days, each with a mysterious prediction. July 15th, a stranger will cross your path, seeking a favor. July 16th, a creature of the night will find its way into your sanctuary. July 17th, the sky will weep for you, but you will find only darkness in these tears. July 18th, your most beloved creation will betray you. July 19th, through flames, a cherished life will be consumed. After reading this, I was left in a state of confusion and disbelief. There was no way this letter could be real, I thought. I had my fair share of obsessive fans sending me ideas of my next novel, or their unedited manuscripts. It wasn't a stretch to imagine that a deranged fan or a prankster with a twisted sense of humor had discovered my new address and devised this elaborate hoax. Whoever was behind it, I had to give them credit for their creativity. They had the makings of a great horror writer. I returned the contents to the box, closed the lid, and set it aside. I made a mental note to change all the locks, then returned to my yard work. The next day I was busy patching a crack in my living room wall when I heard a heavy knock at the door. I wasn't expecting any visitors, so I slowly opened the door a crack, keeping the chain lock still in place. Standing on my porch was a man in his late 40s, tall and lean with a disheveled brown hair and a scuffy beard.
Yes. Can I help you?
I asked wearily.
Hey, I'm sorry to bother you,
He began.
but my car broke down in front of your house. I think the carburetor is busted.
He pointed at the blue sedan with its hood popped up and smoke bellowing from the engine. I sized him up with suspicion. I remember the prediction about a stranger crossing my path. I hadn't thought the letter had literally predicted a stranger coming to my house and asking for help. Instead, I wondered if this guy was the one who had buried the box in my backyard as a prank. Cautiously, I offered to call a tow truck for him while he waited outside. He happily agreed. I closed the door behind me and called the tow company. The man politely waited on my front porch until the truck arrived. He thanked me with a smile and left with the truck driver. For the remainder of the day, I peered out my window to see if the stranger returned, but I never saw him again. I convinced myself that it was just a coincidence, and as far as coincidences go, it wasn't the most absurd. Strange things have happened. The following day, the bizarre time capsule and its unsettling prophecy still occupied the forefront of my mind. However, when my agent called, inquiring as to why I hadn't replied to his multiple emails, I was thrust back into the reality of my professional obligations. The publisher had been breathing down his neck due to my delay in submitting drafts for my much-anticipated second novel. I was contractually bonded to deliver a complete draft by the year's end.
Just one chapter, Alex.
He pleaded.
A rough draft, anything. It'll pacify them for at least a month.
I'll have it ready by the end of the week.
I assured him, placating his concerns. Secluding myself in my office, I faced my laptop with grim determination. I vowed not to leave for any reason until I accomplished a writing goal of 2,000 words. By 10 p.m., I was sitting in the dark with my laptop screen as the only source of light. I had managed to produce only about 1,000 words. Feeling somewhat claustrophobic in my small, stuffy office, I opened the windows to let in the crisp night air sweep in, carrying the scent of wet grass and the faint rustling of leaves. I took a deep breath and leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes for a moment. Suddenly, a loud flapping sound jolted me back to reality. I jumped from my chair, my heart pounding in my chest. From the darkness of the night, a shadowy figure swooped into my office. Panicked, I ducked, my mind rushing back to the note's prophecy about a creature of the night. Was this it? The figure collided with my bookshelf, sending books showering to the floor, and hooted loudly before landing on my desk. Gathering my courage, I switched on the desk lamp. The room was instantly bathed in a warm glow, revealing my intruder, a barn owl. With an eeriness that sent a chill down my spine, the owl slowly turned its head almost 360 degrees, like a scene out of The Exorcist, observing its surroundings. I had never been this close to an owl before. I hadn't realized how large they could get. This particular one was almost the size of a young child.
Hey there. Easy now.
I said, grabbing a flashlight from my desk. I slowly approached it, still crouched, with my flashlight arm extended. Before I could get very far, the owl spread its wings wide. With a powerful flap, it took off again, sweeping across my office, flying straight out my window. My meticulously organized notes fell victim to the gust created by the owl's wings, scattering across the room like confetti. I poked my head out the window and followed the bird with the flashlight beam. I saw it glide into the tree line. It was slightly unnerving how its flapping wings barely made a noise. It perched on a branch, turning its head around to look back at me, its massive eyes reflecting back my light. I jumped back, shutting the window with a bang. As I paced around the room, cleaning the mess the owl had created, I felt a sense of unease. One prediction coming true, I could pass off as a coincidence, but this one was so oddly specific. I was starting to fear for my life, but what could I do? Go to the police? I'd be sent for a psych evaluation before I even finished my story. I couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. Instead, I stayed up and researched everything I could find about the history of the house and the family in the photograph. The articles I found about the house revealed it was built in the 1880s and had changed hands several times before being bought by a young couple, William and Evelyn Hastings, in 1921. They had a daughter named Lily Margaret Hastings in 1922. I found a news article in 1927 titled, "Miracle Child Thought Dead Wakes Up at Funeral." The article revealed that Lily had fallen into a frozen lake when she was 5. She wasn't breathing when her father pulled her out and was declared dead. As embalming wasn't common at the time, her funeral was held the very next day. As they lowered her casket into the grave, mourners heard faint scratching from within. When they ripped open the lid, they found the child shaken but very much alive. Doctors were baffled at how she had survived. The theory posed in the article was that the icy water had put her into a deep coma where her breathing and heartbeat were too faint to detect. The only other significant thing I found was an obituary for Lily from 2019. She had lived a long, full life and passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 97. She was survived by 2 children, 6 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren. The obituary noted her love for dogs and the beach, and her career as a professional ballerina.
That explains the trinkets.
I muttered to myself. Her obituary was written by her granddaughter, Hannah Sullivan, who was the local head librarian. I glanced at my watch. It was already 5 a.m. Morning brought a dense layer of cloud cover. As predicted, a sudden and violent storm swept over the neighborhood, casting a shadowy gloom that echoed my inner turmoil. My rational side still insisted that this was an elaborate prank, but the creeping doubt in my mind was growing stronger with each passing hour. I reasoned that if anyone had answers, it'd be Hannah Sullivan. I looked at the library where she worked and saw it was only a 20-minute drive away. I waited for the storm to break before heading out. By 10 a.m., the storm showed no signs of letting up, but I was desperate for answers. I tucked the letter and photo into my coat pocket and ran to my car. I drove through the rain-soaked roads, the wipers screeching as they moved across the windshield. As I pulled into the library parking lot, I noticed that it was nearly empty, with only a few other cars present. The library itself was a Victorian building that looked like it had been recently remodeled. Entering the library, I found it almost deserted except for a young woman at the reception desk. She was engrossed in a book, her glasses perched on her nose and her dark hair tied up in a messy ponytail. I glanced at what she was reading and saw that it was a copy of my book. I approached her gingerly. I was soaking wet and still unsure how to explain my strange predicament without sounding stark mad. As I neared the desk, she looked up, setting her book aside and offering me a warm smile.
"Hello,"
she said, her eyes brightening behind her glasses.
"Can I help you find anything?"
I'm actually here to find Hannah Sullivan.
I replied, meeting her gaze.
I read that she works here.
The woman looked at me with suspicion.
May I ask who's asking for her?"
She asked. I knew I couldn't just tell her the true reason for needing to see her. I had one little card to play. I pulled out my business card from my pocket and slid it across the desk. She read it, her eyes widening.
"The Alex Travers, the author of Fragments of Fear,"
she asked excitedly. She checked the photo on the inside of her book jacket to confirm. I concocted a convincing lie about wanting to research local lore for my next novel. And after offering her a copy of the book, she was more than happy to lead me to a small office tucked away in the corner of the building. She knocked lightly on the door before opening it.
"Miss Sullivan, there's someone here to see you." "It's Alex Travers,"
the young librarian added in a giddy tone. Hannah looked up from her computer screen, surprised by the interruption. She was a striking woman in her early 30s, her ginger hair pulled back into a neat bun. Freckles scattered across her cheeks, her eyes brilliant emerald green, regarding me with curiosity. She seemed far less impressed with my presence than her colleague.
"Thank you, Amber,"
she said to the young woman. Amber lingered at the door, hoping to be part of the conversation, but she got the hint to leave when she saw that everyone was just standing awkwardly in silence.
"Mr. Travers, please have a seat.
Hannah said, her tone cordial but guarded.
To what do I owe this unexpected visit?
I sat down in the chair across from her. I hesitated, unsure how to proceed, but I decided to get straight to the point. I explained to her that I had recently bought her great-grandparents' house. I reached into my coat pocket and retrieved the weathered photos, laid them on her desk. Hannah's eyes slightly widened as she studied the pictures of her ancestors.
I found these in my backyard a couple of days ago.
I said.
They were in a box buried near the old oak tree.
There was a flicker of surprise on her face, quickly replaced by a look of concern. There was a moment of silence as she traced her fingers over the image of the young girl in the picture.
And the letter?
She started.
Was there a letter in the box?
I was shocked. I hadn't even mentioned the letter yet.
How did you know there was a letter?
I asked, perplexed, handing her 2 handwritten sheets of paper. She examined the letter carefully.
This is my great-grandmother's handwriting,
she said.
But how did she know my name? And the current date?
I stammered, the fear creeping back into my voice.
I just don't understand.
I'd heard the stories, but I didn't think any of it was true.
She spoke, talking more to herself than me.
What stories?
I demanded. Hannah looked at me, her eyes filled with empathy. She sighed deeply and began.
Mr. Travers, my family has a rather complicated history. My great-grandmother Evelyn was a spiritualist. She held seances, believing she could communicate with the dead. You've no doubt read about my grandmother Lily's story?
I nodded in confirmation.
Well, there's a family legend that when Lily drowned in the lake, her mother made a deal with the spirit world to bring her back.
She continued.
What was the deal?
I probed.
A life for a life,
she answered.
Not the life of anyone she knew, but that of someone who would live in the house in the distant future.
I thought about what she said for a moment, and suddenly it all clicked.
Wait. So you're saying Evelyn traded my life to save her daughter?
I asked.
In a sense, yes.
She confirmed.
This is my life. Do I not get a say in this?
I argued. Hannah sighed.
You have to see it from her perspective. She was getting her only child back, in exchange for the life of a complete stranger who wouldn't even be born in her lifetime. What parent wouldn't make that deal?
This is insane. Is there any way to reverse this?
I asked, anxiety in my voice. The rain outside echoed my desperation, fiercely hitting the library windows. Hannah's face fell.
I don't know. This isn't something I've ever dealt with. As far as I know, no one's ever tried. You can't just undo 3 generations of my family's existence.
Her words were cut off by a sudden crash of thunder. The room darkened as the power went out, only sporadic flashes of lightning illuminating the space.
Damn it!
I shouted, more from fear than anger. I got up abruptly, knocking my chair to the floor.
Are you messing with me? Is this your idea of a joke?
I accused, fumbling in the darkness towards the door. Hannah gasped, clearly taken aback by my reaction.
No, I swear. I wouldn't joke about something like this. I
didn't want to hear the rest. I pushed my way out of the office, navigating the dark library, and I found my way to the exit. Outside, the storm was raging, but I didn't care. My mind was spinning, caught in a whirlwind of fear and disbelief. The rain quickly soaked through my clothes, but it did little to dampen the fury panic consuming me. I sat in my car, staring at the list of prophecies. The next to the last one worried me almost as much as my own impending demise. As I read the phrase, "Your most beloved creation will betray you," one more time, a shiver ran down my spine. My first thought was my book, my characters. But how would fictional characters turn on me? I wondered. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, trying to piece together the cryptic prophecy. I pored over my manuscripts, searching for any characters or plot points that could possibly betray me. I didn't know what I was looking for. I don't even remember falling asleep, but I was awakened by a news alert on my phone. The headline sent a chill through my veins. Fanatical reader commits heinous murder, recreates scene from Fragments of Fear. It felt as if the floor had given way beneath me. As I read the gruesome facts of the crime, my heart pounded frantically. The fan, a man named Robert Mills, was reportedly obsessed with my work, especially the serial killer character, Owen West, from my book. He had been apprehended after strangling his wife, which he claimed was a homage to one of Owen's most brutal killings. Feeling nauseated, I dropped my phone. My mind was racing. In a state of panic, I contacted every spiritualist, paranormal expert, and occultist I could find. All were either incredulous, dismissive, or too eager to explore my desperation. None were able to offer anything concrete or even plausible. I contemplated boarding a plane and fleeing to the furthest corner of the world. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how pointless that would be. The prophecy wasn't tied to the house, it was tied to me, and there was no escaping myself. On the morning of July the 19th, I woke up with a sense of dread. The final prediction was to be fulfilled that day. Despite the comfort of daylight, the threat felt imminent. The morning passed in a blur, my thoughts consumed by what was to come. The knock on my door in the afternoon startled me. When I opened it, I found Hannah standing there. Her green eyes were filled with a strange mixture of apprehension and hope. She held an old book in one hand and a large bag slung over her shoulder.
Mr. Travers, I'm sorry to show up unannounced,
She began.
but I couldn't stop thinking about our encounter yesterday. I think I might have a solution for you.
Do you?
I asked, trying not to raise my hopes.
Yes, if I may come in.
She said.
Please, come in.
I responded, leading her inside. Once inside, she laid the book on the dining room table.
I spent all night going through my great-grandmother's old books of spells and rituals,
She explained.
and I found this.
She opened the book, directing my attention to a particular page.
Life transference spell?
I read where her finger indicated.
I believe Evelyn used the spell to transfer Lily's death onto you.
She explained.
Is there a ritual or something to reverse this spell?
I asked.
There is, but there's a catch.
She replied, looking at me seriously.
What's the catch?
I asked nervously.
If we do this, it will change everything.
She warned, her voice grave.
You'll effectively erase all the events in your life that led you to this house, to this moment.
I looked at her.
What do you mean by erased.
The spell, as it works, will shift the trajectory of your life away from your current path.
Hannah clarified.
Your memories and experiences, they will remain intact. However, to the world around you, it will be as if fragments of fear never happened. You would have taken a different path in life, one that wouldn't have led you to writing that particular book and the fame it brought you.
But this is my life's work. My dream.
I stammered, feeling a lump form in my throat.
I dedicated years to writing, to getting my work out there. And now you're telling me I have to give it all up?
Hannah's expression softened, her eyes showing a glimmer of sympathy.
Mr. Travers, Alex, I'm so sorry you had to be put into this position. You did nothing to deserve it. It's an awful decision to make, but there's no alternative.
Hannah's revelation was a punch to the gut. I had been prepared for many things, a bitter battle against unseen forces, a final plea for mercy to the spirits. But not this. I was being asked to forfeit the very foundation of my identity, my successes, my accomplishments. To live on, but to be as a phantom in a life that could have been.
What's the point of living if I'm left with nothing?
I wondered aloud. Hannah placed a comforting hand on mine.
I know it's a lot of pressure to put on one person, but you'll still have you, with all your hopes, dreams, and passions. You'll still have the capacity to love, to feel, to experience life. Isn't that worth preserving?
She asked. I kept my head down, considering my options. Finally, I looked up, meeting Hannah's worried gaze with resolve.
All right.
I declared, my voice sturdier than I felt.
Let's do it. What do we need to do?
Hannah let out a relieved sigh before giving me a weak smile.
I brought most of the items we need for the ritual already. We'll also need a copy of your book.
Okay. I'll get it.
I said. We cleared a spot under the oak tree in my backyard, formed a stone circle, and built a fire in the center. The sun was already setting when we finished. Holding a copy of my book in my trembling hands, I exchanged a glance with Hannah. The enormity of our decision hung heavy between us.
You have to do this. This is your life.
She reiterated, her voice shaking with emotion. I nodded, unable to muster a response. I held my book over the flame, the heat nipping at my fingers. My heart sank as I remembered the countless hours, days, and months I had invested in creating this story. It was more than just a book to me. It was a piece of my soul, and I was about to watch it burn. Before I could second-guess myself, I dropped it into the flames. The book caught fire instantly, and the pages curling and blackening in the fire. A sharp pang of loss shot through me, but I pushed it aside. Hannah interlaced her fingers with mine as we watched the fire. The atmosphere grew warmer, and the flames reflected in her ember eyes. She started to chant in an unfamiliar language, her voice growing louder and more forceful as she went on. I watched in awe as the fire seemed to dance in rhythm with her words. I could hear the echoes of other voices, disembodied and inhuman, chanting along with her. As she continued, I felt her hand growing cold as her grip weakened. Then her hand seemingly slipped through my fingers like a fistful of sand. She raised her hand. I could see her horrified eyes through her translucent palm. What's happening? She cried out in terror. I hesitated for a moment, then turned my gaze back to the flames. Her eyes followed mine. The fire had burned through the covers of the hardback, revealing pages crossed out with a marker, and her grandmother's silver locket hidden between them.
I'm sorry, Hannah.
I confessed, my voice choked with guilt.
I just couldn't give it all up.
You altered the spell.
She stammered, her form flickering and gradually fading.
You erased my family.
Yes,
I admitted, my heart heavy.
I had to. You said it yourself. A life. For a life.
The look of betrayal on her vanishing face was unmistakable. She opened her mouth, perhaps to say something, but before she could, she disappeared completely, leaving me alone in the cold summer night. I stood there, staring at the flames until it burned itself out. Felt alone, inside and out. I went back inside, and out of morbid curiosity, I looked up the obituary for Lily Hastings. It stated that she had died at the age of 5 after falling into the frozen lake. There was no miracle. She was simply dead. I did feel remorse for Hannah. She was just trying to help me and didn't deserve to be wiped from existence. But I hadn't asked to sacrifice my life for her grandmother. My life had been hijacked, used, and manipulated. All I did was reclaim it. My next novel, Echoes of the Past, was another critical and commercial success. The world saw the triumphant return of a favorite author, not knowing the ghosts that linger behind my success. Out of a sense of guilt, I dedicated the novel to Hannah Sullivan, Lily Hastings, and all those forgotten. And of course, I had other narrators to help me bring this story to life. So let me give you the credits of whoever one was. Narrated by 242. Alex Travers by Evil Outcast. Hannah Sullivan by Duchess of Darkness. Editor by Horror on the Rocks. Stranger at the Door by Dark Torment. And lastly, Amber, played by the Queen of Panic. All their links are in the description box for you guys, and please go over and say hi, tell them 242 sent ya. After running out of rations, I was dismayed to see that the wolves had eviscerated the polar bear and left almost nothing edible. Fortunately, they didn't seem to have touched the liver at all. I went to hell and saw something I wish I didn't. By Beneficial Dis 5711. Quick content warning before we continue this story. This one contains self-harm and drug use. If you don't want to listen to this type of story, as always, I have timestamps in the show notes and description to help you skip around. I have been sober for 20 years. I'm 43 now, but when I was in my 20s, I was an addict. It started out with weed, then psychedelics, then cocaine, and finally heroin. I was at rock bottom. I didn't have anywhere to sleep. I was high all the time. I was selling my body for money. All I wanted to do was get my fix. I always told myself, just one more time, then I'll stop. But I couldn't stop. As soon as that needle went into my arm, I knew I had to keep doing it. Last time I used, I died. I remember I was sitting on a dirty couch. There was all types of stains on it. Blood, shit, piss. It was disgusting. I held the spoon over the candle, and I remember the excitement that passed through my body as I was ready to shoot up again. I hadn't eaten anything in 2 days. I was skinny and pale with dark circles under my eyes. I remember being able to feel my rib cage. Now I realize how awful that feeling was. I tied the rubber tube around my arm, pulling it tight with my mouth. I remember shaking as I put the needle closer and closer to the vein in my forearm. Just as I was about to inject myself, I thought I heard a voice. It was a voice of a woman. "You are loved," she said. I can only assume now that it was an angel, trying to get me to stop doing what I was about to do. I played it off as I was hearing things that weren't there, but there was something there, trying to take care of me, looking out for me. I injected myself and I could feel the warmest feeling wash over my body. It felt like I was laying on warm sand on the beach. I felt bliss and happy. Looking back now, I realized I wasn't at the beach. I was in a dark, disease-filled basement, killing myself. I imagined that I was on a canoe in the middle of the ocean. The warm sun was beating down on me, and I was smiling. I closed my eyes. When I opened my eyes, I was laying on an old mattress stained with blood. It was no longer warm. It was sweltering hot. My skin felt like it was on fire. I pushed myself up and looked around me. I was in some sort of prison cell. I could see a flickering light from outside of the cell. I stood up and walked over to the obsidian cell bars and placed my hands on them. I screamed and jumped back, looking at my hands to see they were burned from the touch of the bars. The skin on my palms boiled and sweltered, turning a crimson red. I approached the cell bars again, making sure not to touch them. I could see now what the flickering light was. It was coming from a giant pit. I'm not sure how big the pit was, but if I had to guess, it was as long as 3 football fields and as deep as 2. I looked in terror, and as I saw people in the pit, they were screaming and begging to be set free, to be let go. They were all on fire. Many of them had 3-degree burns. Some of them no longer had any skin. I could feel a tear fall down my cheek. Those people were being tortured. That moment, I realized that I was in hell, and that pit was the lake of fire. Just above the lake was a person. No, not a person. Some sort of being. A creature. It had the legs of a goat, the arms of a man, the head of a dragon, and the wings of a bat. It was Satan. In front of him was a ball of light. He was moving his arms around it like he was caring for it or molding it. Inside the ball of light was a child, a baby with hued feet and a 6 burned into his forehead. I looked on in terror at what I was seeing. My hands began to sweat and I was shaking in fear on what I thought was happening. I knew where I was. I knew that I was in hell. I knew that creature above the pit was Satan. I tried to think of what he was doing, what he was creating. The screams of the people burning in the pit was messing with my head. I was going crazy and wanted to gouge my own eyeballs out. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Then the thought came into my head. I was putting 2 and 2 together. I backed away from the cell bars and sat down on the mattress. It was the Antichrist. That's what Satan was creating. He was creating his own child. The door of my cell cracked open, and in walked what I can only describe as a demon. It was tall, about 7 feet tall, with long legs, gray, decaying skin, and curled horns protruding out of its forehead. Its eyes were bright orange, saliva drooling from its open mouth, and looked hungry. Fresh meat, it bellowed in a low, scratchy voice. As I grew closer, I backed away, when a light appeared above me and a voice spoke. It was the voice of the woman. "Take my hand," she whispered, and I did as I was told and took her hand. I remember being pulled out of the dark and into the light. That's when I opened my eyes. I was in the back of an ambulance. 2 EMTs were beside me. One was holding an IV bag. "We got him," the one shouted. "Good to have you back, buddy. Are you okay?" he asked. I didn't respond. I was strapped down, but I leaned up and looked at my hands to see burn marks on each hand that was starting to blister. It was real. All of it was real. Hell, Satan, the Antichrist, the angel. I was in the hospital for a couple weeks. I overdosed in the basement and someone was there to call an ambulance. I was only dead for 3 minutes, but it felt like 30. After I was released from the hospital, I went to rehab and got clean. I have a good paying job now, a wife and a daughter. I'm thankful for being given a second chance at life, but I still have nightmares about what I saw down in hell. My wife believes in what I saw, and she thinks it was for a reason. Can't help but think, did Satan ever unleash his spawn into the world? And how would we even know? I mean, the Antichrist could be walking among the population right now. It could be anyone. I'm telling you this because I need the others to know. I need people to know what I saw, the terror that I felt. I violated company protocol and Googled my client's name. When I saw his victims' photographs, I decided to dye my hair black. There's a door in my mom's basement that shouldn't be there. By Jonathan S. 223. I'm glad I found this place. What's happened to me has been sitting with me for quite a few weeks now. And I don't know if any of you will believe me, but here we go. So, 3 weeks had passed since my mother passed away. As much as I wanted to ignore everything and just wallow in my grief, I knew I had to go clean out her house. My wife had been gently coaxing me in that direction a week after the funeral. I found myself in the basement of our old house much sooner than I wanted. Shifting through memories and mementos my mother never got around to getting rid of. The air was thick with dust and nostalgia. As I moved a stack of old yellow newspapers, my eyes caught on something peculiar, a door, tucked away in a corner. Oddly, I didn't remember even seeing it before. Now, this was not my childhood home, but a place she had moved into after my dad had died. I had been down in the basement quite a few times and never remembered a door here. Hesitantly, I approached the door. It was plain, unassuming, yet felt strange to look at. I don't know how to put it in words, but the longer I looked at the door, the more my eyes wanted to look away. Like this plain wooden door hurt to be looked at. Curiosity got the better of me, and I reached forward and grabbed the cool handle. An unexplainable dread fled over me, causing me to release it as if it had burnt me. What the hell was that? I had thought to myself, staring at the worn knob. Stepping away from the door for a few moments, I haphazardly went through the basement, finally locating my father's old military flashlight. You know, the ones that are drab green and at an angle? I had recently switched the batteries out, so I knew it was good to go and returned to the door. Taking a breath, I put my hand on the knob, turned it, and pulled it gently open. Though it did not creak loudly, there was a puff of stale air that escaped, carried along with a scent of plant decay and dirt. As my beam shined down, I was surprised to see solid stone steps that descended, hit a landing, and then turned around the corner to what I expected to be another flight. How the hell was there a flight of stairs like this in my mother's house? Taking a deep breath, I stepped onto the staircase. Each step echoed in the hollow space, though it felt like that sound could not get past the open door above. I continued to the landing, peering around, and found another set of identical stairs that continued. After ascending those 2 flights, a feeling of unease began to gnaw at me. Though the walls had been plain at the start, they were now adorned with faded frescoes and intricate carvings that felt familiar yet foreign. The air had grown heavier, as if not moved in years. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was intruding on some sort of forgotten realm, a place not meant for the likes of me. I paused, catching my breath at the sight of the first stone door. Its surface was covered in strange glyphs, which I recognized as Greek symbols. The door was ajar, and based on the collection of undisturbed dust, it had been so for quite a while. Beyond it, the next set of stairs looked older, less cared for. Layers of dirt coated each step, undisturbed until now. My heart pounded in my chest. This didn't make sense. How could this exist beneath my mother's house? A house I thought I knew every inch of. I should have turned back at that point, but I knew I had to keep going. As I made the first flight and landed on the new doorway, the entire design of the stairway had changed. The floor had become a white and black marble with Grecian-style pillars carved out of the walls on both sides. What I was not ready for was what lay beyond the corridor. This is impossible. That's what I kept telling myself. This is absolutely impossible. I stepped into the subterranean marvel, immediately noticing the cooler air and the hushed serenity that enveloped me. Before me laid an architectural wonder, an underground bridge reminiscent of ancient Greek elegance. Both the bridge and its landing were crafted from the finest marble, its surface smooth and lustrous under the soft ambient lighting. The marble was a tapestry of colors, primarily pristine white, veins with subtle streaks of gray and hints of blue, resembling the skies of the tranquil Mediterranean. The craftsmanship was exquisite, with each slab meticulously joined, creating an almost seamless flow of stone. The bridge arched gracefully over the still, reflective waterway. The surface of the water mirrored the majestic structure above, adding an unnatural quality to its gentle ripples, sending soft echoes through the subterranean world. Flanking the bridge were rows of columns, robust and simple. These columns supported an intricately carved frieze above, depicting scenes of ancient Greek mythology. I could recognize some of the stories, but a lot of them were unfamiliar. The landing areas at both ends of the bridge were spacious and clean. They were adorned with empty pots that appeared to have once held trees or plants, but now had long since died. There was a subtle fragrance on the air that I could not quite figure out where it was coming from. Overhead, the ceiling was high and vaulted. It was adorned with artful mosaics, each tile meticulously placed, depicting the night sky, though I could not locate any familiar constellation. And that was hard to believe since I grew up studying the stars with my dad. I stood there staring in disbelief at what my eyes were showing me. I even reached out and touched the side of the bridge a few times, just to prove to myself that it was there. In hindsight, I should have turned and left immediately. This was impossible and real at the same time, which did not spell a good outcome for me, but that did not happen. As I think back on it, it felt as if I was in a dream, and like everyone in a dream, logical decisions are not easy to come by. Before I even had a chance to think on it, I began to walk across, my footsteps echoing softly. I was about halfway across the bridge that I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. I immediately spun to look to my right, broken out of my dreamlike reverie, but found nothing. In that very moment, I could have sworn I saw something moving up around the tops of the outcropping of the vaulted ceiling. I shined my flashlight up there and found nothing out of the ordinary. Well, out of the ordinary for a place that should not exist in the first place. With a bit of a hurried step, I made it to the other side of the bridge instead of retreating the way I came. Like an idiot, I needed to know where this was going. On the opposite side of the bridge, there was another identical corridor that led to yet another flight of steps. Impatiently, I hurried down them and came to a halt in front of another door. This one was pure granite stone, almost 2 feet thick. I knew this because it looked like someone had spent a lot of energy pushing on it and got it to move enough to allow a human to squeeze through. This door had symbols on it too, like the earlier one. I recognized them as ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. I had no idea what they said, but my love of ancient history made me confident in my find. At that moment, I knew I had come too far. Have you ever had that moment when you realized you were in way too deep and that you needed to get out? I felt that to my very core. The air had shifted around me, and I knew it deep down, but as a fool, I decided I need to keep going, just a bit further. Shimming through the opening, I was plunged into blackness except for the light coming from the cracked stone door. The darkness beyond was almost palpable. I aimed my flashlight directly ahead of me and saw that there were more stairs. These stairs were ancient, unevenly worn, as if carved thousands of years ago. The air was suffocating, thick with dust and the weight of time. I could barely breathe. As I descended, a faint, indistinguishable sound reached my ear. It was barely audible over the sounds of my own footsteps, but it was there. A whisper, a murmur, something alive in this tomb of history. My heart raced and a cold sweat broke out on my brow. I wasn't alone, and I was the idiot that got killed in horror movies. I pressed on, driven by a mix of fear and fascination. The stairs became treacherous, uneven, and dangerously steep. With every step, I feared I'd slip and tumble into the inky blackness that the light struggled to cut through. Finally, I reached yet another door. This one was closed, sealed shut as if it hadn't been opened in millennia. It was weathered and appeared to have been hewed from the stone by hand. There were only a few scratched symbols in the door that I recognized. Babylonian. It was almost as if I had gone through time and arrived at a door to one of the planet's oldest civilizations. The handle was a simple rope and had been looped through and looked as ancient as the door, but somehow yet intact. I put my hand on the knob, knowing that the next decision would be the dumbest I could make, but I had to see what was on the other side. Fortunately, I never got an opportunity. I heard it first behind me, a hiss that was quite loud. I spun around in terror to see what had followed me into the earth. At first, my light could not find it, but that was because my brain could not process what I was seeing. It was a giant snake that was almost as tall as me as it sat back on its coils. Its scales shimmered like emeralds in the dim light, and its many heads, crowned with horns, swaying gently as if in a trance. The head of this creature was wide and its eyes golden and unnatural. Have you ever looked at an animal and realized it was thinking and smarter than you? That was the feeling I got as it focused on me. The forked tongue came out as it tasted the air. Shit, I had thought to myself as I wondered if I could move to the wall in hopes it had somehow not noticed me. That was stupid to think, since it was looking straight at me. From deep within its throat, it began to emit strange sounds, combinations I had never heard of, but was pretty sure it was speaking. When it spoke again, the tone made it clear it was upset I had not responded. After the third attempt, I could tell it was done. The movement was quick, but I either was damn lucky or was off balance, or a mixture of both. The strange snake monster lunged at me, and I instinctively dived to the side. The massive body went overhead and landed with a thud against the ancient, unopened door. I did not wait to find out what its next plan was. I sprinted with all my might, fueled with adrenaline, and dashed back the way I came. The sound of scales against the dirt told me it was right behind me. As I ran up the uneven stairs, praying I did not slip, I felt its breath on my neck a few times. I threw myself through the crack of the door, scraping my head against the stone, causing blood to pour into my eyes. I heard the thump of the creature hitting the door and causing the crack to become smaller. Part of me knew it could not get through the crack anymore, but the rest of me did not care. I ran and ran up flights of stairs until at last I burst back into the extremely small basement and kicked the door closed with my feet. The door slammed shut and I screamed for my wife. That is pretty much where my story ends. My wife came running down the steps and saw the horrible state I was in. I'm pretty sure I babbled quite a bit because she could not make out anything I said. A few hours later, when I calmed down, I mentioned the door, and she looked at me confused. What was strange is that I took her down to the basement and pointed it to her, and her face would go blank. It was like she could see it, but just not comprehend it. The look people get who are half awake and talking to you in your sleep. In the end, I gave up trying to explain it, and we left. Why am I telling you this? That's because I want someone to know. I went back and the door is still there and it still opens. I plan to go in again and see if I can discover more about it. Why am I the only one who can comprehend it? Why does it exist? I know that snake thing is still in there, and I'm pretty confident it's trapped, which allows me a chance to explore the rest. Is it stupid? Probably. But I need to know. I need to know why there is a door in my mom's basement that leads to a place that should not exist. I'm just waiting for my gun permit to clear and finish my research on Greek, Egyptian, and Babylonian myths to help me understand. Once I've gotten that, I'm going back in. I'm going to find the answers, and nothing is stopping me. I was confused this morning when I saw "You all no longer deserve them" spelled out by clouds in the sky. But the frantic calls of pet owners, absence of buzzing insects, and the distinct lack of bird songs outside quickly cued me in on what that meant. Don't buy books off the dark web. By Drechenaux. I can't be very detailed specific here due to the nature of my job, but I will try my best to communicate the story as best I can. I work in a cybercrimes division of a law enforcement agency. That's as specific as I can get. And I want to be clear here. Most of the stories that you read about the dark web are outright fabrications. The tales of red rooms and the stories of hiring hitmen are particularly universally untrue. Most crimes take place on your normal everyday web. On Tuesday afternoon, though, I got a call saying that there was a new case for me. Well, the officer on the other end of the call didn't seemed to be too sure if it was a case for me, but wanted me to have a look anyway. I went down to talk to two young boys. Both of them were teenagers, likely still in high school. I was wondering what this was all even about when one of them started blabbering about something that they got off the dark web. Apparently, the two of them were doing a TikTok or YouTube channel. I can't care to remember which one it was, but they were looking for things to buy off the dark web. Again, honestly, there's very little shady activity that goes on the dark web, unless you want to buy drugs. So the two of them were mainly disappointed. Until they found a site that sold books, one of which they bought. I was handed the book in question. I put on a pair of gloves and flipped through it. It was filled with photos of a young lady. Initially, they were of her smiling in locations such as that of meadows, a city square, though as it went through, they became more provocative, for a lack of a better term. She began wearing outfits like a maid uniform or a catgirl cosplay, and the last few photos were of her wearing nothing. "Is this all you wanted to show me?" I asked, wondering what the fuss was about. It was then that I was handed a card, one that had come with a book. It said, "Thank you for purchasing, dear customer. Inside you can find a treasure trove of photos of a young girl. Though that's not all that's special about this book. To make sure that this is truly one of a kind, we made sure that you can get the full experience. So feel free to gently caress the leather as you think of her. Again, thank you for your purchase." At this point, I should probably mention for those who might be unaware what anthropomorphic bibliography is. It is the name for the practice of binding books with human skin. I probably don't need to say this, but it is illegal. Even assuming the skin was from a cadaver, you run into laws dealing with human remains. This card, though, from what was written on it, it was made to sound as if the skin had been taken from the girl while she was alive. Well, either that or she had been killed and then skinned specifically to make this book. I thought the whole thing was an elaborate joke. My first hunch was that the two boys were in on it, but they seemed too scared for it to be a hoax on their end. And I interviewed the two of them separately, and their stories held up. Alright, perhaps they were telling the truth, but that didn't mean that the book was really bound with human skin. Even if it felt like leather, it was most likely animal leather, and all of this was for added flavor. I told the officer in charge of the case just that, and said that there was no real need to investigate further. Though I did give the young boys a warning regarding buying things off sketchy websites. And that's when the case ended. Or, so I thought. As it turns out, the officer in charge of the case decided that on the off chance that it was real, to get a book tested. And it turns out the leather buying the book was, as a matter of fact, from human skin. As you can imagine, interest in the case surged after that. We were dealing with a potential murder case now, and we called the two boys back. I was also brought back on board to try to get to the root of things, and I was able to get the Tor address of the site they used. Unfortunately, all I got was error messages when I used the link. I did some more sleuthing, but that got me nowhere. Frustrated, I turned to the other source for help, but there was little progress that I was able to make. Further analysis of the skin revealed that it did belong to a woman and one of Caucasian descent, which all lined up with what I saw in the photographs. But there was little else that the forensics could do, as the process of preparing the leather made any other tests unviable. A DNA test of the skin didn't reveal anything, and we searched far and wide to see if anyone recognized the girl in those photos. No match till date. The case was about to turn cold when I managed to find an unexpected lead. On a forum, I caught wind of someone else who had purchased a similar book, and was confused regarding the veracity of what was claimed about it. It was 3 states over, but we managed to track down the poster, who was a woman who had bought it out of morbid curiosity. Forensic testing revealed the cover was made of human skin as well. She had a different Tor link, one which I tried, and this one actually worked. The site by itself was nothing impressive. It was a basic as could be kind of old site back into the 2000s. I would have thought it was a cheap prank based off of that alone, but the 2 cases made me hold back my skepticism. I took screenshots of the website and confirmed with the 2 boys who first came to us with this case that this was the site we were looking for. Both of the books had been mailed from fake addresses from mailboxes within large cities, so there was little to go on there. Given this, we decided to try the site for ourselves and placed an order, only for nothing to turn up. If anything, what happened was that the site's URL no longer worked. And it's here where things took a sinister turn. One of the boys, the one who had actually ordered the book, went missing one day. He was coming back home from school and then, well, there was no further trace of him. A manhunt for months came up with nothing until one day, the other boy came to us saying that someone had delivered a piece of paper to his house. It wasn't a normal piece of paper. It was a roll of parchment. Testing it later revealed that it was skin of a human, and DNA tests showed that it was from the boy who had gone missing. Upon it, written with what was later confirmed to be blood, were the words, "Stay out of our business." I don't like to admit this, but that single incident spooked me beyond anything I had ever encountered. I'm not really used to being in the line of fire. Yeah, I know I'm part of the law enforcement, but my work is usually done behind computer screens. I didn't catch a wink of sleep for 3 nights after we confirmed what it was. I vividly remember how his mom broke down in tears when we gave her the news. There were no more leads aside from that anyway, and I honestly want nothing more to do with the case anymore. People who would gladly skin someone and then use that skin are not people I want to be in close contact with. Well, the case might be over, but I'm leaving this here as a general warning. Do not buy things off the dark web, even if it's most likely a joke than not, because sometimes they might not be kidding. Growing up, my father's favorite quote was, "Family ain't blood. It's the folks that stick by you through thick and thin." I found out how much that meant when the looters broke through our barriers and all he had to give was me. My best friend bought a dog on the dark web by Dante's Ghost 92. It was a chilly evening a few weeks ago when my friend Jason and I found ourselves indulging in the dark corners of the internet for our particular amusement. We would quite often peruse the dark web trying to find the strangest things we could in that lawless place. We had been doing it for years since we first got access to the dark web back in high school when Jason found out about Tor. We'd seen everything, from drug sites to snuff sites, but on that particular evening, a particular link caught our attention. It was titled Doolittle's Bazaar. Intrigued, we clicked the link. A digital miragerie showcasing exotic animals of all kinds opening up in front of us. It was obviously run by poachers and boasted a large amount of endangered and rare species. Mesmerized by the bizarre collection, we scrolled through the listing, indulging by the curiosity on display. It had everything from mundane tropical fish to incredibly rare big cats. We were amazed. Amongst the virtual oddities, a seemingly innocuous pop-up materialized, advertising a dog, claiming it was unlike any other. "This dog is made just for you. It's astonishingly intelligent, capable of comprehending and executing any command, The perfect companion, it read. Its price tag was unusually low for what was being offered, almost too good to be true. Being the animal lover out of the two of us, Jason decided to take the plunge, succumbing to the allure of owning a unique and bright canine companion, as well as the possibility of rescuing the creature from the hands of the poachers. They're probably mistreating the poor thing anyway. You know what poachers can be like. I've seen videos online. Besides, no one else in the world will have one like it, he said, as though trying to justify his purchase. I warned him that it was possibly a scam, but he was determined. As though he had already made up his mind but was now coming up with a justification. He always got like this whenever it came to animals, always leading with his heart. I know it's risky, I'm not stupid. But what if it's legitimate? What if the poor creature is suffering and I can do something about it now? He said. With a nonchalant click of a button, he entered his payment details and placed the order. A sense of apprehension filled me as he clicked the button and the screen flashed payment processed. I wasn't sure why at the time. I think it was just a general distrust of the dark web. After all, we've seen a lot of things on there before. Well, said Jason, let's see what happens. Worst case scenario, I lost some money. Best case, I rescued an animal. We carried on searching through random links in the dark web, but at the back of our minds was the excitement to see Jason's new dog, as well as the anxiety as to whether it was even real at all. We could never be too careful on the dark web. Jason went home later that night, and the events of the evening gradually faded from our minds. Several weeks passed by with no sign of the dog. There was nothing from the company on the dark web either. We both assumed that it had just been a scam and that Jason had just lost his money. I told you so, I goaded each time I saw him. A few days after that, an obscure package arrived at my friend's doorstep. It was a huge box, larger than anything he had ever ordered before. We could easily fit a full-length sofa inside and still have room to spare. Stapled to the top was a note, printed on plain paper with no discerning marks. It read, "Your very own unique companion is here. We hope you enjoy it." Below, in red text, were the words, "No refunds, no returns." Wasting no time, Jason called me. "It's here, the dog from the dark web, it arrived. The box is massive, but I can hear it moving around inside." He practically shouted down the phone in excitement. Point 1 to Jason for always being right. What? Really? Okay, you win this one, Mr. Awesome, I responded, amazed that something actually had turned up. I'll swing by after work and meet your new furball. Sweet, see you then, he said in the same excited tone. Then he hung up. I couldn't help the feeling of excitement welling up in my stomach. I wasn't exactly an animal lover myself. I could take or leave them. But I was still excited to see this new dog. As soon as I finished working, I made my way over to his house as quick as I could, interested to see what made this dog so unique. Knocking on the door, Jason slowly opened it, his head poking out gingerly from behind it. "So, where is it?" I asked, trying to glance over his shoulder. "Come on, I want to see it." "Yeah, okay. Come in," Jason said, his voice quivering slightly. A stark contrast to the confident tones over the phone mere hours ago. I made my way into the house, but there was no sign of the creature that had been delivered. It's in the basement," Jason said, again, that shaky voice. Now, very confused by what was going on, I followed as he led me to the basement. As soon as he opened the door, I was met with an odd stench, not something I'd ever smelt before. It was a sickly sweet smell with a hint of iron. I couldn't help a feeling of apprehension in my gut as I stared down the staircase into the black abyss. Inside the basement, it was dark. There was a small, old light in the middle of the basement, illuminating a small area and casting long shadows across the floor. As I made my way down, the smell was much stronger, nearly suffocating me. I could make out sounds, too. There's no way I could describe those sounds. They seemed like a low, guttural noise, but there was a high-pitched, pained quality to it. There's no way that sound was made by a dog. As my eyes adjusted to the gloom, I could see a large metal cage in the far corner of the basement. It had thick iron bars and a heavy-looking padlock on the gate. The floor was covered in sawdust. The sounds seemed to be emanating from further within. Come here, girl. Jason beckoned again, a quiver in his voice. My eyes remained fixed on the cage, awaiting the reveal of his peculiar new companion. The creature inside it obeyed his command, moving into the dim light. I had to stifle a scream. There was no way that thing could be a dog. It was hairless, with large, red-looking welts all over its body that were held together with stitches. If I had to describe it, I would say that it appeared as if someone had cruelly amalgamated human components to create a macabre imitation of a canine form. Its breathing was the same, low grunt with a high-pitched whine, as though its every breath was pained. Its face looked stretched, like the skin was pulled back, almost like a grimace of constant agony. I almost felt sorry for the wretched thing if it wasn't so repulsive. Oh, God, I said, not sure what else to say. All words left me. I know it's horrible, isn't it? I didn't think this is what they'd send. I was expecting something like a really obedient doorman or something, but not this thing, Jason said. I could hear the sadness and disappointment in his voice. He almost couldn't bear to look at it either. It looks like it's been so badly mistreated. The poor thing. Can you return it? I replied, still looking at the thing in the cage. That same sense of revulsion filling me. No, there's no returns. I'm stuck with her, Jason said in a frustrated tone. Why don't you just give her to a rescue center or release her into the wilds or something then? I asked. I can't do that, Jason snapped, almost offended. Look at her. Nobody take her for one, and she doesn't look like she'd survive in the wild on her own. She needs help. I felt so sorry for Jason. He seemed genuinely upset by the creature in the cage that he was now stuck with. He was a compassionate person, and I could see that this dilemma about what to do and the need to help was eating away at him inside. All right, I said. If you're going to keep the thing, we can't just call it that horrible thing. What are you gonna call it? Got any ideas? Demon Doggo? Scooby Don't? He thought for a second before saying, Lucy. Lucy had been his grandmother's name. She passed away when he was really young. Yeah, I think I'll call her Lucy. In the days following Lucy's arrival, Jason retreated further into his house, isolating himself from friends and social interactions. Whenever he managed to catch a glimpse of him, an uncharacteristic skittishness or an edge hung about him, a stark contrast to his usual demeanor. He still speak and behave like the Jason we all knew, but he seemed distracted, as though he was constantly preoccupied with something. He also started dressing differently, wearing long clothes that covered most of his body regardless of the outside temperature. Whereas before, he was a shorts and t-shirt kind of guy. Every time I'd ask him about Lucy, he would respond with something like, "She's good, yeah," or "She's getting there." But he wouldn't go into much detail. You could see it on his face, a look of conflict, as though he wanted to confide something in us, but he couldn't bring himself to. In the weeks that followed, Jason had gotten worse. It was rare that anyone could get in contact with him at all. When we did see him, he was now a skinny, gaunt imitation of the healthy, happy Jason we knew before. He looked incredibly pale and sickly. He also developed an odd limp in his right leg. When we asked him about what was happening to him, he would laugh it off, saying the doctors were investigating. But his expression didn't seem to betray the same feeling. He looked worried, almost scared. On the very rare occurrences that he did come out with us, he normally only stayed for a couple hours before making some excuse to go back home. We're all worried about him, unable to ignore the signs of his deteriorating condition. I mustered the courage to check in on him. As I arrived at his house, I pressed the doorbell, waiting for a while for an answer. When none came, I knocked on the door, assuming that the bell may not be plugged in. As I knocked, the door opened slowly. It was unlocked. This was strange. Jason didn't normally leave his door unlocked. With a sense of unease now stirring in my stomach, I made my way into the house, shouting Jason's name in the hopes that he would hear me. His house exuded an eerie silence, and a deep sense of foreboding enveloped me as I made my way further into the house. It was empty. There was no signs of anyone there at all, and hadn't been cleaned in what looked like ages either. The sink was overflowing with washing up, and the bins were at the point of spilling over. I shouted for Jason again. Still no answer. I was beginning to get really worried about him now. Growing increasingly concerned, I combed through the house, my anxiety escalating. Amongst my search, a thick booklet perched on top of a cabinet caught my eye. Its appearance suggested recent handling, urging me to inspect it. Picking it up, I turned it over, reading the cover. It looked like a manual with a picture of a creature that looked like Lucy on the front. "So you own a Semigus Canis," was sprawled in the large font at the top. Perplexed, I flicked through the pages. Serenus Canis was Latin for bloodhound. The creature my friend had purchased on the dark web was a very rare and old subspecies of canine that sustained entirely on blood. They were so extremely rare because of their metabolism. They can only go 6 to 8 hours between feeds until their bodies begin to digest themselves, and they starve to death. Horror and dread washed over me as I realized the extent of my friend's situation. I continued searching the house with more frantic urgency, shouting for Jason, but still receiving no answer. Then, from the corner of my eye, I noticed that the basement door was wide open. I could smell that same sickly smell of decay wafting up. It was stronger now, and even more nauseating that I knew it was due to decaying blood. I could also hear sounds from down there, the same low growl and whine as before. But there was another sound mixed to that I couldn't put my finger on. Tentatively, I ventured into the depths of his basement, terrified as to what I would find there. I couldn't bring myself to shout for Jason. It sounds silly, but the sound in the basement sent shivers through me, so much so that I was too afraid to utter a sound. As I neared the bottom of the stairs, I poked my head around the corner to the dim gloom. I discovered Jason laying unconscious in the middle of the basement under the light. He was pale, deathly pale. I ran over to him, my fears being pushed to the back of my mind, overpowered by deep concern for my friend. I rolled him over and tried to wake him, but he was completely unresponsive. I checked for a pulse, any sign of breathing or anything else that would show me that my friend was alive. There was nothing. I shook him again, begging him to wake up. The feeling of devastation was crushing. I was doing my best not to break down, but I could feel the hot tears welling up in my eyes. Jason, my best friend, was gone. I was so confused. What had happened? I knew that he was sick, but I had no idea he was this far gone. Why hadn't he said anything to me? I pulled him close and hugged him, beginning to cry, as though if hugging him hard enough it might bring him back. He was cold as ice. He was really gone. Slowly I laid his body back down gently onto the basement floor. As I lowered him, I noticed a piece of paper had dropped from his clenched fist. I turned to pick it up, and as I grabbed it, my eyes perceived something that I'm not sure I'll ever forget. Emerging from Jason's right leg, a grotesque and sinewy appendage, resembling a nightmarish vein, slithered into my line of sight. Its fleshly color clashed starkly against his pale skin, with a labyrinth of capillaries that seemed to wither and pulse with pulsating crimson fluid. The eerie, almost dance-like undulation propelled the liquid in a disturbing rhythm, leading the eye among the horrifying path into the abyss of Lucy's cage. As if called to action by observation, the tube disconnected from Jason's leg with an audible pop before slowly retracting back into the cage. Then there was a low growl as Lucy made her way forward. She was much larger than last time I saw her, with red stains around her mouth where the tube was receding. Her stomach was also distended and bloated, a deep red color compared to the rest of her pale frame. She looked me in the eyes with her cold gaze and let out another threatening growl. I began to back away, noticing the heavy padlock of the cage door on the floor just beyond Jason. A jolt of fear shot through me. She was loose. Without a second thought, I ran. Fear clenched my heart as I scrambled up the stairs, propelled by the sheer survival instinct. Reaching the top, I slammed the door shut and barricaded with a chair. The door thudded seconds later, as though Lucy was throwing herself at it as hard as she could. The door rattled violently and the chair visibly shook, but it held. She made an awful noise, like a roar, but nothing like I heard before, but she couldn't get out. Desperation clouded my mind as I grappled with the dilemma before me. I couldn't let that abomination escape, not now that I knew what it was. But nor could I bear to confront the monstrosity that killed my best friend. I felt an overwhelming sense of entrapment and exhaustion, as if the weight of the entire ordeal was crashing down on me. With the main danger now secured behind the door, the reality of the situation settled in, threatening to drown me in a tidal wave of emotions. The grief I felt in the basement when I saw Jason's body, my fear as I realized Lucy was loose and now the dilemma of what to do with her. I made my way over to Jason's couch, needing to sit and try to process this, trying to figure out what I need to do next. As I sat down, I remembered the piece of paper that had fallen from Jason's hand as I lowered him to the floor. The piece of paper I was picking up when I noticed the horrific prospectus. In the ensuing chaos, I had stuffed it in my pocket, not wanting to lose the last remnant of my friend. Taking it out of my pocket, I smoothed it out. It was a note addressed to me. It would make sense. He'd know I'd be the one coming to look for him. I began to read the rest of the note. Jason had written the note in his final moments, trying to explain why he had been so distant and strange lately, and apologies for how he had been acting towards me and my friends. He explained that he had not had any other way to feed Lucy, so he had been using his own blood every 8 hours to feed the creature. He knew it was draining him, gradually killing him, but he didn't want her to die. She was a living thing and in danger, he said. She deserved to live, but he wasn't sure how much longer he could keep it up. He asked me to forgive him, going on to say he valued our friendship above all else. I placed the note down, tears welling up in my eyes. I sat there for hours, finding myself grappling with the knowledge that that creature's thirst for blood had been what took my best friend from me, and if I didn't act, it would soon lead to its demise. But my best friend sacrificed his life to keep that thing alive, and if I let it die, then he'll have given his life for nothing. I've still not made a decision yet, but I can't hear anything from the basement anymore. I guess there's no harm giving her a bit of mine for the moment, just to keep her alive while I decide. Yeah, just this once. Buddy whined and clawed at the locked basement door, but his owner had already escaped the burning house. Firefighters were shocked to find a badly burned boy at the top of the stairs, his fingernails ripped off in the wood of the door. Locking my daughter out on the porch seemed like a great way to teach a lesson about curfew. By the third search party, it was all I could think about. I search for things people are too scared to believe in. Part 3, 1 of 2. By Cole Blaze K. A quick heads up before the story starts. You do not need to watch part 1 or 2 or even the side story to get what's going on in this part. I do have a playlist for easy find. It's under Cole Blaze K, as well as it'll be in the description box and the eye icon as well. Now, with all that being said, I do hope you enjoyed the story, and let's get started.
You and I have a lot of work to do.
Echoed through my mind as I sat inside my new home, cigarette in one hand, coffee in the other, just trying to get some semblance of normalcy, even if it was just for a day. After everything I witnessed and went through again, I needed a change. I sold my truck along with some other items and bought a decently sized van. I've been remodeling it for the last few months to make it more viable and a cheaper home, especially if I wanted to continue my work. Speaking of work, I know I've been on a little bit of a hiatus, and I'm sorry for that. I am alive though, so you can stop worrying. Ever since what went down in the town with Greg and Mark, I still trying to wrap my head around it. The entity came into our world, fully came in, and I was the one that helped. But that's not what bothers me the most. After he killed that creature, he reattached its head and put what looked like a seed in the mouth. It then looked at me and just vanished. What was the point of saying we have work to do if it was just going to leave? Ever since he crossed the threshold, my night terrors have pretty much ceased. Very rarely do I have one, and if I do, it's manageable. After shaking hands with it, I got a burn on my wrist in the shape of a hand. In my dreams, it was all black and the entity came crawling out of it. But that's enough of that. Things are better, and I want to share some things with you. I've been asked a couple times to do so, and I thought now would be the best time to talk about the previous cases. I'm on break in a national park that is just beautiful and have ample time to sort through files. Moving kind of makes you go through your old things or find forgotten things. So when I started rereading old cases, I thought I should share them with you. A few are unsolved and some are still pending, but I thought talking about them would maybe shed some light, hopefully moving towards solving one of them. The first case I have for you is the Red Door. Case log 04, location Kansas, Wichita. As I finished up an old case, I made my way through Wichita to see a couple of things there. I'm a sucker for sightseeing. After my first day there, I was walking out of a coffee shop and I saw a frantic man handing out flyers. He handed one to me and I kept walking, thinking nothing of it. Finally, after coming to a crosswalk and having to wait, I examined it. There was a picture of a woman and a red door behind her. On the top of the page read, "Have you seen this woman?" And at the bottom it read, "Have you seen this door in your dreams? If so, call." Curiosity took over, and I caught myself walking back towards the man. He seemed tired and disheveled, like he hadn't slept or cleaned himself for days. His clothes were wrinkly and his hair was greasy. Noticing another passerby, he reached his flyers out to them and they just swerved out of the way. Everyone acted as though he wasn't there. He cried and fell to his knees, then began talking to himself. No wonder no one took him seriously. I was probably the first to take the flyer. I approached the man and squatted down beside him.
Here to call me crazy and shove me down some more?
He said, wiping away tears.
No. I'm here to ask you about your flyer.
I replied, reaching out a hand to help pick him up. We sat down at a table and talked for over an hour about what occurred. Apparently, he dream-walked with his girlfriend to see this supposed red door. He said he was seeing it almost every night. The first couple of attempts didn't work, but the fourth one did. When they finally saw it, she decided to go into it. Before he was able to follow, the door slammed and he woke up in a pile of sweat. His girlfriend was nowhere to be seen. It was as though she vanished without a trace. He's been looking for her ever since, trying to see the door again, but it's been to no avail. Then nightmares began and he stopped sleeping. He wanted to dream walk with me, but I wasn't able to help. Dream walking is a dangerous thing, and I've been told too many times about the power of dreams. I gave him the information for Josh, a specialist I know, and went on my way. A couple of weeks later, Josh called to talk to me about the case. He said he and the man began their dream walking session and came across the door. Josh knew what it was instantly. The man had lied and said he needed to find his inner spirit in order to trick Josh into doing it. The red door has been a dream phenomenon for a while, and it's always been said to avoid it. Josh tried to stop the man, but he burst through the door and was gone. When Josh awoke, the man was gone and he hadn't been seen or heard from since. Case log 04, The Red Door, unsolved. The next case was one that I received a lot of questions about, the Wendigo, or at least that's what I think it was. Case log 07, Clean Bones, location Black Hills, South Dakota. I had no intentions of stopping in Spearfish, South Dakota, but when you need gas, you need gas. While filling my tank, I noticed a flyer up on a pole by the pump. Inspecting it, I noticed it was for a girl who had gone missing while camping. Underneath hers was another one for a guy who had gone missing in the same conditions. I put 2 and 2 together and figured they must have been camping together. I took one of the number slips and gave it a call, setting up a time to speak with the parents. Audio transcript, case log 07, location South Dakota.
You don't mind that I record?
Not at all, as long as it helps find our daughter and her friend.
So, what is it that you can tell me about the location they went to?
As far as I know and what she told me, they were going to Iron Creek Trail. It's a few miles past Bridalveil Falls. You should see the bridge and a pull-off section. That's one of the trails she frequented the most. It is unmarked though, but she usually camped out just a few miles in. I'm scared though, because this isn't the first person to go missing around here. There have been 3 others. They had just found the shin bone of the first person missing a few days ago, saying it was a wild animal or something. The thing is, the bone was completely clean, as though something was nibbling on it for days.
Just the bone? And you said it was completely clean?
Clean except for a little chunk of flesh in a groove, just enough to identify the person.
Man was a convict, so he won't be missed.
Joseph, that is a terrible thing to say. A life is a life no matter the sin. Sorry for his intrusion, but some people are saying it might be something supernatural, like a...
Oh, don't go spouting off that horse shit. There's nothing supernatural about it. I think the man's got enough information now. Go find our daughter and don't come back until you do.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate your info and I'll be in touch.
Audio transcript case log 07 end. 5 people missing from the area all around Black Hills is going to be hard to pinpoint. At least I have some okay amount of information to go off of to find the 4th and 5th missing. First missing, deceased most likely with the whole leg bone showing up. That or some forged records happened. I went around the surrounding towns first to find info on the 2nd and 3rd missing. Couldn't find anything on the 2nd, but the 3rd was interesting. The sister of the 2nd didn't want to be interviewed. She just told me her brother went missing around Barnes Canyon. On my 2nd day investigating, the 3rd missing person was found in the middle of Cold Brook Canyon. At least, the rest of him was. Spanning in a 1/4 mile radius with multiple bones picked clean in his head right on the trail, as if someone wanted it to be found. I tried interviewing one of the rangers who were on the scene. They declined and told me to leave it to them. Of course, I'm not going to. But some more information would help. This leads me to the biggest worry I have. Either the 2nd body has yet to be found, or has already been consumed, or is next dinner before the daughter and her friend. So, no more talking to people. Time to get my hiking boots on and have a little walk. While searching around the trail, a sudden fear came over me. The fear of walking into the unknown and having no idea what you're getting yourself into. Surprising, right? Coming from a person who just started looking into the unknown. But this is a feeling that I have gotten used to. About 3/4 a mile in, I thought I saw someone standing behind a tree way off in the distance. The thing was, they didn't have any distinguishing features. They looked like they were in a black morph suit, but it was getting dark and there was quite a bit of trees. So, against my better judgment, I began to make my way to them. A couple steps in, I noticed a jacket on the ground. It was a little beat up and had some blood on it. Kneeling down to inspect it some more, I heard a voice calling out. Turning around, I noticed it was one of the rangers I tried to talk to at the last crime scene. Audio transcript case log 07. Location, Iron Creek Trail.
What are you doing out here?
You know, just going for a little hike.
Really? You just happen to be going for a little hike where 2 people went missing? One of them whose parents you've talked to. I told you to stop investigating and leave it to us. But you gave me a feeling that you weren't going to listen. So I followed you. And, well, looks like I was right.
Silence goes over the recording as we both are standing there. Tension in the air rose, and then died as soon as I slightly moved my arm and pointed to the jacket.
What's that?
The girl's jacket. Looks like your department did need my help.
Whatever you say. We would have found it once we set the dogs loose.
And when was that supposed to...
I cut myself off as I noticed a broken, bloody branch about 4 feet away. The crunching of the leaves came through until I stopped and knelt down.
They went this way.
How do you know?
I used to do quite a bit of tracking when I hunted. Then it got a little better once I began looking into these things that I was investigating. You'd be surprised how many people go missing and what's really out there.
You really believe in all that nonsense? Aliens, cryptids, Nessie, Bigfoot, all that jibber-jabber.
Some of it, yes. Sometimes it's nothing but a psychopath or a cult, but other times there's no other explanation.
How
Someone, please, help!
The voice sounded different. It was too off. It was even more apparent in the recording.
It came from this way! Move, now!
Wait. Stop. Hold on, just a second.
I grabbed his arm to make him stop.
Help! Someone, please, help!
What the fuck are you doing? They need our help!
That sounded exactly the same as the first time. Can't you tell? It sounds off too. Just listen.
Silence filled the recording for about 30 seconds until it was broken.
Help! Someone, please, help!
See? It sounds exactly the same. It's also coming from the south. The tracks are heading east. Something doesn't want us going this way.
I don't believe you! You're crazy! Someone is out there and needs our help!
Okay, listen. If they're that way, the tracks will begin to head that way. So let's just keep following them until we come across something, okay?
Fuck! Fine. Better know what you're doing, Cryptid Hunter.
Audio transcript case log 07, end. I noted down that nickname in case I ever wanted to make business cards. Also, to have something to look forward to if I survive the upcoming interaction. After about 15 more minutes of walking, we stumbled upon an alcove. Towards the end, an entrance to a cave could be barely seen. It was just about nightfall now, and the forest was getting a lot darker. Mark and I both looked at each other, saying, "You go first," with our eyes. Finally, getting enough courage, I pulled a flare out of my bag and struck it. A bright incandescent red fled over and illuminated the area around us before dying down a bit.
You do know I have a flashlight, right?
Mark said with a snarky tone.
I know, but this fills the whole area. Not just a small beam. Also, red is a lot less hard on the eyes than white light.
I replied, entering the mouth of the cave.
Fair point.
He replied, following behind. Walking through the cave felt as though we were walking through a portal to hell. The deep red light mixed with the small reflections of the cave wall felt almost otherworldly, as if we were traveling a place we weren't supposed to be. After a few more minutes, the smell of rot hit my nose like a freight train, almost making me gag.
What the fuck is that?
Mark said while gagging into his hand.
I don't know. But it means we're getting closer.
I replied, dropping the flare and striking a new one.
I don't think we should be here. This feels like an animal den. What if it comes back?
Mark and I both stopped and stared in silence. On the ground, a few feet in front of us, was a pile of dead bodies. Deer, coyotes, rabbits, and a mountain lion were all laying there slowly decaying.
Safe to say it's not coming back, but I'm more worried about whatever did this.
I said, slowly walking around the pile. Mark just gagged and stayed silent until we hit a partially lit opening. The opening was massive and a few dimly lit candles were strewed around. It was a much larger area than I had thought. We were only able to see a few feet in and a couple of other spots as the flare was dying down and the candles were afar. Dropping the flare and getting ready to strike a new one, Mark stomped it out and pushed me into the crack in the wall. Unable to say anything because of his hand over my mouth, he quietly said,
"Shut the fuck up. I heard something."
With that, the noise of a claw scraping on the rocks passed by. Standing there in the dark, not knowing what to do, I heard a girl crying in the opening. It was unintelligible, just a lot of sobbing and half words. The sounds of something heavily breathing was coming through the opening now. Then came the sounds of what I could only guess were tendons and muscles being ripped. After that was done, we could hear what sounded like someone eating a pie with no hands and an open mouth. Except that this was no normal pie. It was guttural, sitting there listening to the chomping and chewing. Then a final snap and a sucking sound ended the symphony of grotesque noises. The girl was crying louder now, asking and begging.
Why? Oh no! Why?
Through sobs, suddenly there was a scream followed by cracks and groans, and then a man spoke. Audio transcript case log 07. Location, cave system. Cracks and groans with sobs in the background.
Why are you doing this?
Why? Simple hunger. Sleeping. Long sleep. Need food.
Where's John? What did you do to my boyfriend?
A dragging noise followed by a loud, wet thump. Then the girl began screaming.
That's it. I can't wait anymore. Hey! Over here, motherfucker!
No, stop! God damn it!
Audio transcript case log 07. End. The man, creature, turned around to see Mark and I at the entrance of the opening. He was barely visible, but you can tell it was scantily clothed and covered in blood. Striking a flare, the area lit up and the thing could be fully seen. Its face was bloody and its jaw was slacked open with a piece of meat hanging out. The thing hissed at the flame and crouched down, almost in a lunging position. Mark began to move to the right and I followed suit. Illuminating more of the area, we could see bones and torn clothes strewn around leading up to the girl. In front of her feet was the dead, mutilated body of the boy she went with. At least, what was left of him.
Gonna be okay. We're gonna get you out of here.
Mark said, crouching down by the girl. Her head was between her knees and she was sobbing inconsolably. The thing was too close for comfort, slowly crawling on all fours back and forth, almost as though trying to figure out the best method of attack. It was growling and hissing, mainly keeping its eye on the flare.
Mark, I could really use some help.
I said, trying to figure out a solution to this problem. I was ignored though. He was still trying to calm the girl. The flare's light was dimming, and the thing was becoming more confident now, inching closer as the flame began shrinking. Putting two and two together, I threw the flare at the right and grabbed another to strike. Surprisingly, my throw was a lot more accurate than anticipated, hitting it in the face. What came next was the most horrific and guttural scream I had ever heard. It sounded as though 1,000 mountain lions were screaming their last screams before death. I really pissed it off now. It lunged towards me, no longer caring about the flare in my hand. Rage was the only thing fueling it now. Doing the only thing I could think of, I dove towards its feet as it lunged. My timing was not as precise as I thought, and the feeling of razors cutting me shot across my back. Still rolling from the dive, I noticed it slide and hit the side of the cave wall, releasing another loud shriek. Then loud bangs began echoing as I noticed Mark unloading his handgun into the creature. It was distracted now, and I had to come up with a quick plan. The flare was a few feet away, and in its ever-dimming red light, I noticed a bottle of lighter fluid. It must have come from a backpack that had been ripped open from the thing's nails. Thinking quickly, I began fast crawling towards the bottle, snatching it up before my attention was drawn away. Looking up, I saw Mark had backed away in an opening of the cave wall. The creature was hacking and slashing away at the wall, trying to make its way closer to him, laying out a hellish scream and flinging rock debris all over. Gaining control of myself, I quickly got up and ran towards the creature, opening the bottle of lighter fluid. Gripping it as hard as I could, I began spraying the liquid in X formation as though I was swinging katana. The creature seemed to have taken notice of me the second I was done spraying it. The thing lunged at me, slashing its claws towards my torso as I fell back. I landed in something lukewarm and sticky. Confused as to what it was, I had to focus on the task at hand. The creature hovering over me. It was just watching me, cocking its head from side to side, as though it was meticulously figuring out the best way to dismember and eat me. Trying to crab walk away, I figured out what it was that I tripped on. It was the body of the girl's boyfriend laying there lifeless, and as pale as a ghost. Even in the dim-lit area, I could see the fear that was frozen on his face. The creature was still standing there watching me, breathing heavily in and out, in and out. Then it finally took a step towards me as its jaw sliked open and drool began to pool out. I felt my hand touch something as the creature was going down on all fours. Gripping it, I heard Mark begin to scream and charge the creature with a pocket knife. An ill attempt, though, as the creature backhanded him, swatting him away like a fly. As much of a failure that was, it gave me enough time to figure out what was in my hand. It was one of my flares, and an unlit one at that. Nervously, I untwisted the cap and prepared myself mentally for what was to come. Striking it caused the monstrous head to snap towards me, sounding like a cacophony of bones cracking. It flung itself towards me as I threw the flare at it, making it and the flare connect mid-air. Time seemed to have slowed down as the creature's body ignited into a fury of inferno, almost hitting me. The smell of death, burning flesh and hair filled the air as the creature began frantically flinging itself around in hopes of putting out the fire. It was a futile attempt. The damage was already done. The thing fell to its knees, laying out a final hellish screech before slumping to the ground, lying there lifeless, slowly burning away until it will become nothing but ash and bones. Not much more can be said about the whole affair. I do not want to bore you with a bunch more notes about what was in the cave. Mark, the girl, and I got out with minor injuries. I had a few slashes on my back and one on my chest. Mark had a dislocated shoulder and a minor concussion. Then the girl only had a couple of minor scratches and bruises. Multiple bodies and bones were found at the site, but no more of the information was disclosed to me. Mark and I still keep in touch from time to time. He retired from being a ranger, and the girl just got married this year. But Mark and I were invited. It was a beautiful ceremony, and the whole affair of how we met was never brought up. To be continued next week. When the Coast Guard's cutter finally located the missing MV Deep Harvest, they found no crew members on her upper decks, and the words, "Don't eat it," scrawled on several bulkheads. They found the mangled remains of the crew in the cargo hold, surrounding a huge banquet of untouched luxury foods, which all the seamen agreed was starting to look very tasty. And here's the credits for everyone who helped me bring this story to life. In order of appearance. The entity was played by Horror on the Rocks. It was narrated by me, 242. The street guy was played by Count Julius. Main character was played by Grimm Reaper's Nightmare. The mother of the missing daughter was played by the Queen of Panic. Joseph was played by Hollow. The male cop, Mark, was played by Lucid Lupus. Unknown female was played by Dark Little Voices Decay. The unknown creature was played by Phoenix Fire. and the missing girl was played by Serpentmythos. Thank you everyone for lending me your voices, and please check them out in the description box / show notes. Miss Olsen's, I know it must be very difficult, but we need your testimony about what happened at the compound, said the detective to the near counter-talk woman in front of him. There was a long pause, and just as he's about to give up, she spoke. I hid in the basement. Everyone had been herded upstairs, and that's when I heard the screaming and the blood. There was so much blood, it dripped through the ceiling like rain. I search for things people are too scared to believe in. Part 3, 2 of 2. By Cold Blaze K. Just to give you guys a heads up, you don't need to listen to all the others to get this one. It's little mini stories within this one, so it's easy to follow. But if you want, there will be a playlist called Cold Blaze K for you guys, and it'll be in the description box. Now, on with the story. The next case is a weird one. Still gives me chills thinking about it from time to time. This case follows some irregular sightings that happened. This maybe could have been how this whole weird phenomenon started. The Clown. Case log 05. Location, Minnesota. This is an unusual one. Today, while scrolling online through certain back channels, I saw a bunch of people talking on forums about seeing a clown. My first thought was a Gacy wannabe, then next was some people trying to get some scares out of people. Halloween's passed and it's the middle of winter. This person, or people, have to be delusional. It's probably nothing but a prank. It's now been a few days, and I decided to check the forums again before I decided to leave. Still just a few sightings here and there. Nothing really caught my eye, until I saw a link to an article. Guess this clown or clowns stepped up their game because 2 people were stabbed and 1 was killed all in a night. The curious thing about this, though, is that these all happened within a couple hours. Looking up the location of each, it would have taken a couple of hours to go back and forth from the towns. I still don't know if this is something that is up my alley, but the town is only an hour away. It doesn't hurt to take a look. Today I snuck into the hospital and was able to interview one of the stab victims. Then I made my way to the next town where the victim died and spoke to the coroner. To start off, the interview with the stab victim, getting into his room, was pretty difficult. Turns out he has a watch on him, but everyone has to go to the bathroom or eat at some point. It took 2 hours of sitting there and reading until the guard finally got up and went somewhere. I knocked on the door and let myself in. The man stared at me curiously until I told him what I did and asked for an interview. He agreed. Audio transcript case log 05, location Aragon, Minnesota.
Thank you for your time, Mr.
You can just call me Jacob. Or Jake. Whatever works.
Okay, Jake. Thanks for giving me the time of day. Not many people would. To start off, can you tell me the events of what happened?
I just finished up my shift and was heading out to my car when I noticed something in the tree line by the parking lot. It was a little windy out and snow was blowing, so I really didn't know what I was seeing. That is, until I got a closer look.
What did you see?
It was someone dressed as a clown. Not just a mask, but the whole fucking getup. Red nose, big shoes, and all the makeup. It was like I was at the circus. It was just standing there, watching me. I got creeped the fuck out, of course. I mean, it's a damn clown in the trees. So I started to jog towards my car. As I was moving across the parking lot, the clown was following me, but still in the trees. I just don't get it. 1 minute, I was in the front of the parking lot, and he was like 30 feet away in the trees. Then as soon as I turned to unlock my car, he was right behind me. No noise, no sound, just there. Then a sharp feeling on my side, and I wake up here.
That sounds utterly terrifying. I am honestly just as confused as you are. You only saw one person. There weren't two there.
Yeah, it was not a fun time. I'm sure it was just one person. The clown was dressed the same and looked the same. Also, the police said there were only 3 sets of tracks. Mine, one heading to where I was found, and the next was heading back into the forest. Same shoe size, shape, and imprint. I was told that the shoe prints looked oversized and misshapen. They said they followed it as far as they could into the forest, but they just disappeared. 1 second they were there, the next they weren't.
Interesting. That's very surprising considering the amount of snow on the ground. There should have been at least something. But for it to just be gone... I'm sure you've heard that there were 2 other victims. Did you, by any chance, know them?
No. No idea who they are. It's sad to think about it, though. I mean, 2 of us survived, and 1 didn't. The thought of that bothers me. I could have been him. I could have died. I just feel bad for his family.
Is there anything else you can recall? Anything that might help me find this clown or clowns?
I'm telling you, man. There was only 1 clown, and nothing more that I could think of. Sorry. Sorry I couldn't be of more help, officer.
I'm not, Never mind. Thank you for your time again, and I hope you get better. Have a good day.
Audio transcript case log 09 end. After I finished transcribing this interview, I packed up my stuff and decided to head to the next town over. It was about an hour drive, long enough to make me reflect on the interview. Something he said just didn't sit right with me. Only 3 sets of footprints. That would make it almost impossible for it to be more than 1. So that begs the question itching in the back of my head. Is this all some sort of elaborate prank gone too far? Or is it actually some sort of supernatural being? As I entered the coroner's office, the temperature inside was about the same as the outside. The smell of death and decay came over me, sending shivers down my spine. There was no one at the desk, and flickering lights were sending my senses into overdrive. Felt like someone was watching me. I could have sworn I even saw someone in the corner of my eye. It was one of those weird moments where you think you're seeing someone, but actually don't. I know there is a saying for it, but I can't remember it off the top of my head right now. Staring into the darkened corner of the room as a light flickered put me in some sort of trance. It felt as though all my senses were focused on where I thought I had seen someone. Finally, my concentration had been broken by the coroner touching my shoulder. He asked if I was alright, and after I replied with I was fine, he brought me into his office. Audio transcript case log 09, location coroner's office.
So, what can I do for you, Mr.
I was hoping we could talk about the man that had been stabbed the other day. On the phone, you said there were some irregularities.
Straight to business kind of man. I understand. There's just a small means of compensation that we discussed. That nice watch on your wrist would do mighty fine.
500 should be enough. Yeah.
Damn, that watch ain't worth this much, but business is business. Okay, let us get started. This man had been stabbed only once, right under the sternum. He then dropped to the ground and bled to death. My best guess was that he passed out from the shock, and by the time he came to, he had lost too much blood. Little strength left, and the freezing temperatures didn't fare for him.
Who found him? And what was the irregularity you told me about on the phone?
See, here is the kicker. The only witness was a teenage boy on his way home from work. The kid said he saw someone dressed as a clown attack a man and then stared at him smiling. And so, of course, the kid shit himself and ran off, only to bring help a bit later. He just didn't get to help in time. The other interesting thing that I found was another person's DNA on the body. It was on the outside of his jacket, and also around the wound.
So, whose DNA was it? Were you able to trace it back to someone?
Oh, I was able to trace it all right. But get this. The DNA found on him was one of the other stab victims a town over. Somehow his blood ended up on this scene.
That's impossible. The attacks occurred all within about 20 minutes of each other. How would his blood get on this guy?
I have no idea. It's spooky as shit. All I know is that I'll be sleeping with my gun and shooting anything that resembles a clown. So a little tip of advice for you. Leave town. Hell, leave the state, and don't look back. Let the local authorities deal with this lunatic.
Thank you for the advice and your time. I might just take you up on that.
No, have a good night now. Be safe, and thank you for doing business.
Audio transcript case log 09 end. As I exited the morgue's faded metal doors, I noticed snow falling outside the lobby window. The main lobby was somehow even more dark than when I had first entered. It was as though half of the faded lights finally burst. Trying to comprehend what I had just been told, I began to make my way to the front door. A few feet away from the door, I dropped my tape recorder on the old, wet, yellow tile and it began to play. The only noise that could be heard coming from it was the static of empty tape began playing. Bending down to pick up words from it echoed onto the cold, dark room.
It was someone dressed as a clown. Not just the mask, but the whole fucking...
It stopped as I hit the pause button, standing back up. I slid the recorder back in my pocket, and as I looked up, I saw a person standing outside the main entrance. Not just an ordinary passerby, but someone who was dressed up like a clown. It was only half of their body. The other half was obstructed by the building. It looked as though the clown was just barely peering into the office. A huge frown came across his faded, white face, then it slowly began turning upwards into one of the most terrifying smiles I have ever seen. The corners of its mouth looked as though it was about to reach its eye. Then, to make matters worse, he opened his mouth, showing long, brown, decaying teeth. Drool began to drip out of the bottom of his mouth as we stood locked in a staring contest. Too afraid to lose, I studied everything I could see. His teeth were sharpened, and his tongue was all black. The uniform he was wearing was covered in what looked like a mixture of blood, mud, and snow. Getting a quick glimpse down, I noticed his shoes were almost pristine. It was as though he had shined them. Looking back up, every other dirty or bloody part on him was clean. His shirt was no longer covered in blood or mud, and the only sign of snow on him was a small pile growing on the shoulder I could see. My eyes met his face again, and there appeared to be nothing wrong with it anymore. It just looked like a normal, old-style movie clown with makeup. Next thing I know, he blew his hot breath on the cold door, making it fog up. I wasn't able to see his face anymore because of it. And then he slowly pulled up his finger and drew a smiley face before walking off. Pulling together all the courage I could muster, I ran outside and looked in the direction he had walked towards. Nothing was there but an empty sidewalk illuminated by the yellow incandescent glow of the streetlights and the snowflakes. It was a couple of days since the last clown sighting. After I saw him, a person was stabbed in a town a half an hour away. I went looking around that night for the clown, following the oversized shoe prints in the alley before they just disappeared. If I hadn't frozen in place, maybe the other person would still be alive. Sadly, I can't spend too much time dwelling on it. I'm going to head over to the next town and see what I can figure out. I spent the day today walking around town, asking a couple of people if anything weird had been happening. Most said no, and the few that said yes weren't in the mood for an interview. I only got a few passing words of clown, stabbing, and dead. Once it hit 11, I decided to call it quits. I was pretty tired and in need of some food. There was a gas station that was thankfully open, so I decided to stop there. It was going to be a long night writing this all down, transcribing, and trying to piece it all together. Once inside, I made my way to the surprisingly clean coffee station to pour myself a cup. The dark liquid filling the cup put me in a trance. The lights reflecting off the black stream, along with the rich smell, made me realize how tired I actually was. I stood there for a moment, watching the stream do its little dance from the cup into the air until something caught my attention. In the reflection of the window, I saw one of the best late-night snacks, a delicious sleeve of mini powdered donuts. It had been a while since I had had something sweet, and that would hit the spot. After I finished my journey through the rest of the aisles, I headed to the front to pay. Surprisingly, there was no one at the register. I thought to myself they must be in the bathroom or something, and I should just wait. About 5 or so minutes passed, and still no one showed up. Getting a little irritated, I decided to set a 20 on the counter and leave. Walking out of the store, I finally realized why no one was helping me. In a little partition between the countertops, I noticed a dark crimson liquid slowly making its way across the floor. Leaning over the counter, I saw the guy who was in his 20s laying on the floor, blood slowly pouring out of his neck. I waited for what felt like an hour for the cops to arrive. They put me in cuffs right away and began asking me a bunch of stupid questions. Sitting there silently on the curb staring up at the cop talking to me, I noticed something. Behind him, about 20 yards away, was a man in the tree line. Not just an ordinary man, but one dressed up to look like a clown. He stood there, head slacked to the side with a big, toothy grin on his face. Blood covered his outfit as I could see the glint of a knife in his right hand. Staring it down, he began to slowly raise his free hand and wave at me. It was a type of wave where the fingers meet the palm. He then just stopped and stared before bending backwards. His arms were up in the air, following his head until they finally touched the ground behind him. It was inhuman the way it looked. His head touched his calves, and he began to slowly walk backwards into the trees until I could see him no more. After about an hour, the cops let me go. They were finally able to watch the tapes and saw that the guy was killed by a clown a couple minutes before I pulled up. Once morning hit, I went back to where that thing was in the tree lines, but it was futile. Snow blew over the tracks and there were only a few indicators. When I got back to my car, I noticed something on the windshield. A red clown nose that squeaked when I picked it up. I stayed in town for another few days, but nothing out of the ordinary popped up. No more clowns, sightings, stabbings, or weird phenomenon. Once the police cleared me, I decided to pack up and hit the road again. No need to stay in town if there's nothing to stay for anymore. Another case in the books. Sadly, I can't finish this one just yet. Case log 09, status, ongoing/unsolved. So, there you have it, just a few of the cases I've worked on. I know I have a lot more, but I don't want to sit here and bore you with everything that happened in the past. I'll share some more in the future, but for now, that's it. At least, that should have been it. While packing everything up into their respective files and boxes, I noticed something irregular with a file. It was facing the opposite way from all the others, and I picked it up. I noticed that it also was very thin. Turning around and facing the right side towards me, it read, C. Randolph, along with very faint and unrecognizable scribbles followed by C08-18. Opening the folder and looking at its contents made me realize why it was so thin. Nothing was in it except for a little cassette tape and a torn out piece of paper. This wasn't right. See, I make 3 copies of everything. Yes, I know it's very tedious and takes a while to do, but it's always just in case something happens to one of the files. I have an audio recording, a digital transcript, and then the most bare-bone version, handwritten. The handwritten portion is mainly contained in my journals, but I have copied them to other papers as well. What made this so confusing was that these 2 were the only items. Usually there's a lot of papers, a bigger map, pictures, and actual file. Grabbing the cassette tape and loading it into my player, I noticed that it was wound in the middle of the tape, which was even more off-putting because it was either at the end or the beginning. Have I listened to this before? Have I found this file and went through it just to forget it again? How many times have I done that? All these thoughts rushed through my head before finally ceasing once I pressed play. The loud noise of static pierced my eardrums and made me stand at attention. It sounded like when you actually bump the tune button on the radio and the signal switches, but you can still hear the faintest of the previous station. That's what it sounded like to me. Static with a low and almost unrecognizable voice behind it. I couldn't understand what it was saying or trying to tell me. Pulling the cassette player closer to my better ear, I could just almost make out some of what was being said, but it wasn't enough. Closing my eyes to try and focus on it more helped just a little bit, and then I could finally hear what it was saying. Deep below the static were the words.
I came across this tape just randomly out in the woods. Nothing appears to be on it, just static and a low gurgle.
Shot into my ear like someone screamed it at me with a megaphone. It was my voice though, not the voice I was just about to hear underneath the static. I was so close, I swear I could finally understand it. It was saying... What was it saying? Fuck, I can't remember now. Setting the cassette player down and looking outside, I noticed the sun was just beginning to rise. That's not right though, it was nighttime just a second ago. I listened to the tape and it was night. Closed my eyes trying to figure out what was being said, then it opened them to morning? I couldn't have been listening to that all night, that's impossible. Turning back around and looking where I placed the cassette tape, I noticed a colored paper beneath it. It was an old, wrinkled, torn-off piece of map. On it was a part of Wyoming, Nebraska, and Kansas. with the majority of it being Colorado. There was a small circle and dot on an empty section of Colorado. No town names nearby or anything, just a mile marker and a single road. Well, it looks like I know where I'm going. I need to figure out what's with this cassette and empty case file. Wish me luck. The girl we had bullied and made fun of all summer long got on stage for the camp talent show and pulled out a pocket watch. A half an hour later, we were so deeply hypnotized, we instantly obeyed when she said, "Now, why don't you all do what you've been telling me to do all summer long? Grab a big rock and walk into the lake." And before we wrap this up, let me tell you everyone who joined me to read this story and bring it to life, in order of appearance. The narrator was, of course, me, 242. The main character was played by Grim Reaper's Nightmare. Jack was played by Evil Outcast. Last but never least, the coroner was played by As the Raven Dreams. Please make sure you check out the description box / show notes for all their links and show them some love. Tell them 242 sent ya. And with that, our time together is coming to an end. 2.5 hours long, and I'd be surprised if anyone's actually hearing this recording at all. If you got this far, leave me a comment saying, "I searched for great stories and I found these." Then I know you heard all the way to the outro. And of course, I'd like to thank the writers who let me read their stories almost a year ago, and the narrators who lent me their voices to help bring this to life. I truly remember these stories and how much fun they were to narrate and the journey they took me on. If you enjoy these stories, hit that like button and make sure it feels it. If you're new, please subscribe and turn that pretty little bell to all notifications. And of course, like I mentioned, I would love a comment. And if you're on the podcast and aren't able to, please leave a review. And on Spotify, you're also able to leave a comment now as well. If you'd like to help this channel / podcast grow, please share it with anyone who might enjoy it. If you'd like to support me in a more financial way, like these lovely people on screen, I do have Patreon and memberships, where for $1 a month you get early access and a few other bonuses. But if you'd like to do a one-time donation kind of thing, I do have PayPal, Buy Me a Coffee, and Super Thanks on YouTube. As always, none of this will ever be expected, just always appreciated. I always have and always will love narrating these stories for you. I'm sorry that this took a little bit to get up today. I was having a little bit of problems with some new medication and made it very difficult for me to do anything, on top of still trying to get over a nasty cold I got back in the beginning of December. It has gotten into my lungs and will not leave, and has caused me a few vocal problems as well. But I at least got you something, and I hope you enjoyed these blasts from the past. Sleep tight and don't let 42 bite.